Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into a rivalry that really shook up the tennis world. Steffi Graf versus Monica Seles. Talk about a clash of styles.
Yeah, these two were forces of nature in the early 90s.
Their matches were absolutely electric, and, it always makes you wonder, what if things had gone differently?
It's one of those what-ifs that really gets you thinking,
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just about who would win on any given day.
Right.
It was a battle of totally opposite approaches to tennis.
You had Graf, she was all about that power.
Oh, yeah.
That forehand, like a rocket.
Pure athleticism, that's what Graf brought. She wanted to dominate the point right from the start. Short rallies, boom, done.
But then you had Seles coming in with her two-handed grip on both sides.
A totally different game.
And that topspin.
Heavy topspin forced her opponents into these awkward positions.
So they lose their rhythm.
Exactly. Graf, who loved those quick points, had to completely rethink her strategy.
That's got to be tough, to change your whole style like that.
Even now, people study those matches to see how these two styles really changed the women's game. It's fascinating.
And to think, their first match was at the French Open back in 1989, right?
Yeah.
And Seles was only 15, going up against Graf, who was already a champion.
Talk about pressure.
I can't even imagine.
But you know what? She held her own. Even in those early matches, you could see the talent she had.
Graf did win those first few matches, though, right?
Yeah, the first three.
But Seles had this incredible mental toughness. She wasn't intimidated at all.
Not one bit. She studied Graf's game, figured out how to exploit those weaknesses, and she started really pushing Graf to her limits.
She definitely did. And even though, Graf ended up ahead in their overall record, 10 wins to 5.
Right.
Those 5 wins for Seles, those were huge moments. You could see how much it shook things up.
It's that classic story, in any sport. You have the champion on top, and suddenly there's this rising star who isn't afraid of anything.
It brings a whole new energy, makes things exciting.
Exactly. That's what fans want to see, those epic clashes.
Speaking of epic clashes, we got to talk about those Grand Slam finals,
That's
especially in 1992 and 93.
Oh, man, those were some matches. The 92 French Open final?
Yeah.
Almost 3 hours they were out there battling. You could see the physical and emotional toll it took on both of them.
Seles won that one.
She did.
And then in 93 at the Australian Open, another crazy three-setter.
Back to back. And those wins really cemented Seles' place at the top.
It put her at #1 in the world.
Exactly. She was unstoppable. But then things took a really dark turn.
The stabbing, it's just awful.
It's still hard to believe it happened.
It was during a match in Hamburg, right?
Yeah. A Graf fan totally lost it, attacked Seles right there on the court.
I mean, it changed everything for both of them, not just their careers, but their lives.
Yeah. But even with all the intensity of their rivalry, it's important to remember Graf was incredibly shaken by the whole thing. She visited Seles in the hospital, publicly said how worried she was.
That says a lot about her.
It does.
As a person.
Yeah. It shows the human side of it all, beneath all that competition.
Seles, she was physically hurt, of course, but it was the emotional scars, I imagine.
Oh, yeah.
Tough to come back from that. She was out for almost 2 years.
A long time to be away from the sport you love.
Mm-hmm.
And when she did come back, it was different.
It had to be.
It really was a turning point. For Seles, yeah, but for their whole rivalry, too.
It's hard to imagine how things could have gone if that hadn't happened.
While Seles was recovering, Graf she kept winning.
She did, yeah.
And not just winning, she won like 4 Grand Slams in a row.
4?
Yeah, 4 straight. It's almost unheard of, in the Open era especially.
It's incredible.
So that period really solidified Graf's place in tennis history. I mean, who knows for sure what would happen if Seles hadn't been attacked.
It's impossible to say.
But you can't deny that incident. It really shifted things.
Let's talk about Seles' return, though. That was in 1995, right?
Yeah.
And then she won the Australian Open in 96.
She did. It was amazing to see.
After everything she'd been through, to come back like that.
It showed just how strong she was.
To even step onto the court again.
Mentally, physically, it had to be so challenging.
Yeah.
Even though she won the Australian Open, she wasn't quite the same.
Right. It's understandable, though.
Oh, absolutely.
Huh.
The emotional impact of something like that, it stays with you.
Graf, during that time, continued to win. She ended her career with 22 Grand Slam singles titles. It's really remarkable.
Yeah. It's hard not to wonder if that number would be different if Seles had been there competing all along.
Right. Like, would they have pushed each other even further?
It's a great question. Graf was incredibly talented, no doubt about it.
She was already winning Grand Slams before Seles even came along.
Exactly. So it's tough to say for sure. But that rivalry, that constant challenge from Seles, it definitely pushed Graf to be her best.
It's like when you have that kind of competition, you have to keep raising your game.
You can't get complacent.
It makes you wonder, what if Seles hadn't been stabbed? Would she have kept winning? Would we have seen even more of those amazing matches between them?
It's all speculation, I guess.
It is.
But what we do know is that despite everything that happened, their rivalry left a huge mark on tennis.
Huge.
The intensity, the drama, the skill, it captivated people all over the world.
And they really did change women's tennis.
Oh, absolutely.
They inspired so many young players, not just with their talent, but their dedication, And yeah, even their rivalry, it showed what was possible.
I think the biggest takeaway from it all, though, is the reminder of just how much pressure athletes are under.
Right.
That even at the top of their game, they're still vulnerable.
They're human, like the rest of us. Yeah, it's a tough reminder that things like that can happen. But even with all the tragedy, that rivalry, it's still a testament to how powerful competition can be.
It's true. Both of them, they pushed each other to be better, to constantly improve. They raised the bar for what women's tennis could be.
Showed the world what dedication and hard work can achieve.
And they inspired so many athletes to come after them, showing what's possible when you really push yourself.
Their impact goes way beyond just the records and the wins,
Absolutely. It's about the inspiration, all the people who watched them and were amazed by their talent.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left wondering, knowing how it all turned out, do you think the stabbing actually helped Steffi Graf's career? Would she have had that same level of success even if Seles had been there the whole time?
That's the question, isn't it? That's one that people still debate today. And there's really no easy answer.
It's a complicated situation, and it just shows how much that rivalry really shaped tennis history.
There's so much information out there, so many different perspectives. It makes you think about all those what-ifs.
Yeah. And that's the great thing about a deep dive like this, right?
Exactly.
It's just the start. I hope everyone listening will go and explore this part of tennis history more, come to their own conclusions.
You might even discover some things we haven't even thought about.
Exactly. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the rivalry of Steffi Graf and Monica Seles.